The story I'm about to read you an excerpt from, Down South, was originally released in the Diesel Funk anthology in 2016. It was republished again in 2020 in Hadithi, in the State of Black Science Fiction, which was published by yours truly and Eugene Bacon through Luna Press. And it's currently available in my Muscadine Wine collection. It will be part of a novel called Strongman Blues, which is coming out next year. So I'm going to read you as much as TikTok will allow me to read. And if you want to read the rest of the story, you can pick up Muscadine Wine and read it there. Down South. Roscoe Hill removed his chauffeur hat as he entered Miss Liza's mansion, patted his hair in place with his free hand. Although he worked for Miss Liza for almost 10 years, he'd never set foot inside the expansive home on East 127th Street, Harlem. Whatever she summoned him for had to be special. Celia, Miss Liza's elderly maid, led him into the antique layer foyer, then through the gauntlet of oil portraits hanging from the hallway walls leading to the parlor. Miss Liza sat alone, her ecru skin and light green house dress illuminated by the sunlight reflecting from the large picture mirror opposite the window. She took a sip of tea, then placed the gold-inlaid teacup on the matching saucer on the table before her. Her eyes fell to Roscoe, and she smiled. "That will be all, Celia," she said. "I'll be right outside if you need me," Celia said as she cast a distrustful glance at Roscoe. "There's no need for that," Miss Liza replied. "Roscoe drives me every day. If I can't trust him, I can't trust anyone." Celia glared at Roscoe. "You behave yourself, boy," she whispered. Roscoe glared back. "Mind your own business, you old biddy." He smiled as he turned his attention to Miss Liza. "You asked for me, ma'am?" he said. "Yes, I did, Roscoe. Have a seat." Roscoe sat in the chair next to the door. Miss Liza turned toward him. "How long have you worked for me, Roscoe?" 10 years come this May," he said. Miss Liza laughed. "You've outlasted all my husbands." Roscoe lowered his head, hiding his grin. "I reckon so, ma'am." "Aren't you from down south?" "Yes, ma'am." "Where?" she asked. "Alabama, ma'am. A little place called Seal." "I've never heard of it," she said. "My parents are from the South, Atlanta to be exact. But you know that." "Yes, I do, ma'am." "You fought in the war, too, didn't you, Roscoe?" Roscoe tensed. "Yes, I did, ma'am. I was a hellfighter." Miss Liza knew about his time in the Army. He fought at Champagne-Marne and Meuse-Argonne, earning the Croix de Grou medal from the French. Roscoe came home thinking the medal in his time served would make a difference, but it didn't. The Klan almost lynched him outside of Phoenix City, Alabama, so he got out of the South as soon as he could. If he had had the money, he would have gone back to France. Instead, he ended up a taxi driver in New York, where he met Miss Liza. She was so impressed by his manners, she hired him as her personal chauffeur. "Miss Liza, excuse me for being direct. Why did you ask me here?" Miss Liza's smile faded. "Roscoe, I need you to pick up a package for me. A very special package." "That ain't no problem, ma'am," he said, somewhat relieved. "Where do I need to go? Brooklyn? Manhattan?" Miss Liza looked at him square in the eyes. "Savannah, Georgia." Roscoe shook his head. "Listen to me, Roscoe," she said. "You're the only person I can trust to do this. You're from the South, so you know how to behave down there. If I sent one of my New York men, they'd be lynched before sunset. You're an ex-soldier, so you can handle yourself. I'll pay you $1,000 up front and another $1,000 when you return with the package, plus expenses." $2,000 would set Roscoe straight for quite some time, but he knew his answer long before Miss Liza began her persuading talk. "I'm sorry, Miss Liza," Roscoe said. "I can't do it." "Roscoe, please," Miss Liza said. "This is very important to me." Roscoe stood and put on his hat. "The last thing I want to do is disappoint you, ma'am. You've been good to me. But this is one thing I can't do." "Roscoe," Miss Liza said. Roscoe backed out of the room. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm sorry." Roscoe turned and walked away. "Roscoe, wait." Roscoe kept walking. Celia waited at the door, a grin on her face. You done messed up now, boy, she said. Ain't no way Miss Liza gonna keep you on now. Good riddance to bad rubbish, I say. Roscoe pushed by the maid and continued to his garage. He trudged up the stairs to his room. Celia was right. He would have to leave and find another job. He was fond of Miss Liza. She reminded him of the daughter he never had. But there were some things he just couldn't do. Going back down south was one of them. He opened his closet, then dragged out his trunk, the same trunk he was issued when he enlisted. He opened it and was engulfed in memories. He gazed upon his uniform, neatly folded and pressed, the croix de gruyere still pinned to the pocket. Atop the uniform was his bolo knife in its army-issued canvas sheath. He picked up the weapon and pulled it free, studying the long, razor-edged blade. The last time he held it in his hand was in Phoenix City, Alabama. It was the only thing that stood between him and a lynch mob. He closed his eyes, then shook the memories from his head. A man who fought for his country shouldn't be treated that way. He had the right to defend himself. He sheathed the knife, then placed it back in the trunk. Roscoe shuffled over to his dresser, opening the drawers, and began removing his clothes and placing them neatly into the trunk. And where do you think you're going? Roscoe turned to see Miss Liza standing in his doorway. Well, Miss Liza, I figured since I turned you down on your request, you'd be ready to fire me. Miss Liza sat in his desk chair. You figured wrong. You're like family, Roscoe, and Lord knows I don't have much of that. Roscoe sat on the foot of his bed. I appreciate you thinking of me that way, but Miss Liza grabbed his hand. Listen to me, Roscoe. I'm going to tell you the whole story. After I'm done, if you tell me you won't do it, I'll never bother you again. I'm listening, Roscoe answered. Miss Liza swallowed. When I was 15, I got pregnant. The father was a white boy, Leonard Schumann. Roscoe leaned back stunned, almost pulling Miss Liza from her seat. Pregnant? By a white boy? Roscoe felt anger rising inside. His grip on Miss Liza's hand tightened. It's not what you think, Roscoe, Miss Liza said quickly. Leonard and I loved each other. Leonard's parents were prominent in New York politics, just like my parents. But Leonard's parents weren't about to let their son marry a colored girl, and my parents weren't about to let me throw my life away on some weak-minded white boy. We fought them, but in the end, our parents won. Leonard's parents sent him to Europe. My parents sent me to Atlanta, where I lived until I gave birth. They took the baby from me and then put her up for adoption. Miss Liza's eyes glistened. Roscoe took a handkerchief from his drawer and handed it to her. I held her in my arms, Roscoe. She was so beautiful. I made a promise that day that I would find her, no matter where they took her. 5 years ago, I did. In Savannah? Roscoe asked. Miss Liza nodded. It took a long time and a lot of money, but I found her living with foster parents. I sent them a letter explaining who I was and what I wanted to do. I promised I would not try to take her from them. I only wanted to communicate with her. They agreed. So you ready to break your promise now? Roscoe said. About 3 months ago, my letters started coming back. I've been going crazy ever since. I think she's still in Savannah, but for some reason, her family decided to stop corresponding. Miss Liza opened up her purse, reached inside, and took out a picture. She handed the picture to Roscoe. Her name is Mary Ann, Miss Liza said. She looks like you, Roscoe replied. I want my baby, Roscoe. I want my baby home. I'll pay you whatever you want. Please do this for me. Please. And that's a portion of Down South. Check it out. I think you'll enjoy the rest of the story. Y'all take care. Peace.